right, thank you for coming here today. I'm Joel Stocker from the School of Medicine right here at NCKU. Guess I'll give you a local perspective. Okay, all right. So I teach medical humanities classes, largely targeted towards medical students, and I also have some general education classes. And I want to talk first about some of the general issues that are facing us all these days, and then talk a little bit about anthropology, my field, and medical anthropology and medical humanities, and then do, as brief as possible, a comparison between the responses in, I'm American, so the US, China, Japan. I'm a specialist of Japan, anthropology of Japan. And if we have time, talk a little bit about Taiwan and perhaps South Korea as well. Okay, let's see if I can do this all quickly. All right, some of the challenges facing us we've heard today from the beginning with Dr. Brosat's talk. We have, are we going to choose economic prosperity or protection against a disease? Are we going to preserve life, or are we going to preserve liberty? You know, these are some of the issues. Experts versus lay people, right? Fake news versus whatever is not fake news these days. It's really hard to know, right? Not fake news. Fake news seems to be a new standard. Yeah. Okay, we've got the rise. We see it even in Taiwan, which has had a very successful defense of the country against this invader. I'm using these terms kind of intentionally. At war, struggling against this virus, right? But we see a rise of the gig economy. You notice the surge in all these people on scooters delivering food. You know, that's gig economy. People paid very, very little in very tenuous jobs, highly precarious economic position. This is the future for many of us, the majority of workers. Service sector people, what we call in the US essential workers, right? Who are usually not treated politically, economically, they're treated as unessential, as almost useless, as being lazy, as being undereducated, as not deserving of social welfare, not working hard enough. Okay, and so we see the elites versus the working class oftentimes. This is what's happening in the world today. Surveillance, what's your position on that? Political struggles where ethnicity, age, worker rights are all competing for voices. But in my country, for example, we have the elites rewarding themselves, giving themselves tax breaks, giving themselves huge, multi-trillion-dollar US dollar stimulus packages, and not really doing much of anything in terms of health care, in terms of stimulus, economic stimulus packages and so on for the working class, for especially ethnic minority groups, for the older people, for people with disabilities, and for service workers and what's called the precarious workers who do gig jobs. Right? Are we going to see a surge in localization, a return to the local, instead of, in the past, decades exporting manufacturing to mainly China, exporting pollution as well, all of that. Now we have local gardens, we have local work. We're going to need to figure out what are we going to do when robots replace us. Are we going to have new forms of unionization of workers as well? We need that as well. So on the horizon are radical choices that are being made for us by corporations and governments, and also hopefully to be made in some way, however despairing we are right now, by the people as well. I worry, as a teacher in teaching medical humanities, as an anthropologist, are we able, as so-called experts in various areas of medicine or whatever it might be, social sciences, humanities as well, are we able to teach our students? Are we prepared right? As older, generally older people, supposedly with a certain amount of knowledge in certain areas, are we here prepared to teach our students what they really need to know to survive in the world that's coming? And COVID-19 is just the edge of the disasters that are coming. Multiple crises, disasters are coming because of course climate change is a much bigger problem. This is just a warm-up, so to speak. Okay, so are we going to give in to free market profiting and greed? Are we going to be further radically changed by disaster capitalism as the capitalists are using this more to their advantage than to the ordinary common people's advantage? So far they're winning all over the world. And I really despair because of that. How are we going to convey, if you have this viewpoint as I do, and I think many intellectuals share this point of view, we must become public intellectuals. This is the rise of the public intellectuals. We need to fight the fake news. We need to fight against anti-vaccination people and the people who are saying that the virus itself, coronavirus, is a hoax and all of that. We need to convey that to our students. We need to give them a way to communicate with others about that when they, in the future, become professionals and must be public intellectuals as well. But is the era of the expert over? In Taiwan, I think we see the success of the defense against the coronavirus, and we would say it's not over. The experts are winning here, right? We got the command center, we got epidemiologists, public health people. People are listening to the experts, right? But in other countries, a lot of other countries, and there's been this trend towards, in response in some ways to the desecration caused by neoliberal economic policies of austerity over the last 40 years. People are rebelling, populism has become popular, and however, it's become, the trend that's winning is fascism and neo-fascism, and the trend that's winning is, it's a hyper-capitalism, a crony capitalism, plutocracy, ruled by the rich getting richer and richer. Just 5 billionaires in the US in the last couple of months have made an extra $500 billion off of COVID-19. What's going to happen when we have even more crises piling up one after another? Typhoons and hurricanes and wars and migration, everything that's going to happen with climate change, which is happening faster than any experts have predicted. Okay. Now, within anthropology, what are our answers? Do we have any answers from up on high, from the mountaintop of intellectual knowledge? Maybe not so much. We have great figures in anthropology like Franz Boas, who was talking about how social change has always been important to anthropology, and we've always looked, whether it's evolutionary change, cultural diffusionism, or the relationship between culture and political economy. How does change, social change, affect different people around the world? What's the relationship between different cultures in looking at change? Anthropologists are prepared in some ways to deal with this question. Marshall Solins, a University of Chicago anthropologist, his research from the 1960s up through the 1990s, he made this point that other anthropologists have also made, that catastrophe, disaster, reveals fault lines. It reveals the cracks, the weaknesses in societies around the world. And this is a big, big crisis we're in. And it's only the beginning because of climate change, right? So we're beginning to see more and more harsh relief, the fault lines, where the problems lie, who we need to blame for these underlying problems of why so many countries have not been prepared. In my classes in medical anthropology, medical humanities, I've looked at, I developed a special week just to talk about COVID-19 in this medicine and culture course, and I focused on metaphor, the power of metaphor. And I think Professor Liu's talk, when she talks about stigma, that it's, you can see immediately from the beginning, not just at, 2 weeks later or something, from the very beginning, this disease, this virus is metaphorical. It's changed, spun into political and economic and other resonances, right? The cultural meanings of it are always there, and oftentimes the groups that are going to suffer most from these metaphorical uses of the virus are minority groups, ethnic minority groups, politically groups that don't have a large voice, economically groups that don't have a lot of assets, wealth, power, money, income. People with, and one thing within medical anthropology that we focus on is, if you look at poverty, the things that most explain, the factors that most explain disease, right, it's not biology, it's social policy decisions by leaders in a society. And we see this with COVID-19 as well. The US, a total disaster, my country of the US. Taiwan, doing very well, right? It's the same virus. What was the difference? The big difference was policy decisions, and we see the combination of comorbidities, right? People who have underlying diseases already, oftentimes because they're poor, because they're living in crowded urban conditions where there's a lot of pollution. They have a very unstable job situation. Health care access is limited, right? Plus a history that could be, in the case of the United States with African Americans, over 400 years of racial ethnic discrimination that is very severe up to this day. Look at the cops killing, white cops, killing black people, innocent people, and all the protesters being abused now in the United States. And the metaphors around the virus, that kill the virus is an enemy. There's a militarized, weaponized code, sign that is being used by to talk about the virus. And it's, regrettably, that's okay maybe, but it's applied to certain groups of people, like those Mexican immigrants coming into the United States, right, who are already being treated like animals, and now they've been put at risk of COVID-19 more, and they're, somewhat being blamed for the disease as well. Okay, so if we look, I think public health, epidemiology, medical sociology, medical anthropology, medical humanities, we have to stress how social in nature diseases like this are, and that there are always underlying conditions that are political and economic and social status and so on that are more important than the virus itself. And that's a key. If we look at the United States, 40%, right, of African Americans, 12% of the population, but 40% are being affected, and the death rate is higher, right? They tend to have more comorbidities, more other health conditions already, living in more precarious conditions. We have to be aware of these things. Taiwan, too, I think some people could talk about sex workers in Taiwan. People could talk about immigrants in Taiwan, right? There's differences in how they're treated and what their level of health and health care is compared to other Taiwanese people, I think. Okay. So lastly, what do we see that's similar between China and the US and Japan, but especially US and China? Why were their responses so disastrous, right? And I think some of you have already alluded to this or mentioned this, but it's because there is a lot of the largest economies, the three largest economies in the world, they feel that they have a lot to lose. So they cover up the information. They don't rely on their experts. They rely on their arrogance instead. They also rely on their control over the media, right? And their ability to get out there and lie in front of and create, in the case of Trump, create fake news every word coming out of his mouth, right? And so there's a lot of reasons, I think, why, but I think those are some of the main reasons why China and especially the US has failed, and Japan to a lesser extent. Japan the government's been heavily criticized for having a poor response, especially allowing with the Diamond Princess cruise ship. Many of the cases on the Diamond Princess cruise ship were more than all of Taiwan's cases, and the same death rate, 7 deaths, just from that one cruise ship. right? And now there's over 2,000 cases and about 700 deaths, I believe, in Japan. But Japan has had some failures, but not as bad as the third largest economy in the world. They had some cover-ups, and they didn't rely on their experts, but some people are saying that the experts were able to, in the vacuum of power, to step up and take charge. You know, nobody was doing anything, so experts stepped up and took charge. And Japan also has thousands and thousands of local community healthcare centers. And they don't have a lot of nursing homes like the United States does. The United States has, for example, you know, that 60-some% of the transmission and deaths in the US are through nursing homes, right? So we have that as well. Taiwan has the good healthcare infrastructure, but South Korea and Taiwan, what I see is the similarity between these two countries and why they've been so successful. One very obvious reason, let's debate this, okay? I'm just throwing it out there. Their port of entries are very limited. You have Taoyuan International Airport, maybe Kaohsiung International Airport, but once you don't trust China, you say, let's lock it down, let's test, let's trace, right? Let's take care of people who are ill. Once you do that, you know, whether you wear masks or do the alcohol or check people's temperatures, those things don't matter so much because you've already stopped it at the border. And it's very nice to have just one major point of entry, right? South Korea had a little bit of a problem with the religious group gatherings, but through rigorous testing and tracing, they were able to get things under control too. I'm just throwing that out there, okay? Let's have a discussion about this.
Professor Stock 非常丰富，非常多角度哈。那有几点或许等一下我们也可以进一步讨论的哈。他指出来说如果从 impact 疫情的 impact 来看的话，生物的跟公共防卫的因素可能是比较小的。一个社会里面真正受害的呢，是社经结构下面的弱势、极端弱势者。他特别举美国呢的黑人为例。美国黑人无论是在健保、经济收入、社区的卫生等等的，都是非常糟糕的。因此呢，这一次的受害是最深的。所以他在强调说，这个第二呢，以国家层级来看的话，那么政府呢，它事实上是负责很多决策的单位。他如果考量，他特别举中国跟美国还有日本来谈说这个国家因为它有所损失，无论是各种因素，会 cover一些 information， 而这些呢是真正造成伤害的。我自己最后想对比的，我知道还有一位讲者，我很想对比几个国家一个是如果你们去看越南的话，越南跟澳门跟新加坡，越南呢它事实上到现在没有死过一个人，它infected 的也是非常少，可是它跟中国的边界那么长，那为什么？那澳门也是相对少的，所以全世界几乎最成功的防疫是来自一个共产国家，叫做越南，那这个是我蛮好奇想了解对比，不晓得这边有没有专家？